I am Ryan Curry, vCIO at GPL. So what we're going to be talking about today is introduction to managed services, and I'll be talking about GPL specifically, but managed services and a couple examples of case studies and how we uh, apply managed services to our clients, as well as our philosophy on our engagement with our customers and how we interact on a daily basis. First, I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of GPL. So GPL was founded in 2003 as a systems integrator and evolved into a managed service provider. Started with the majority of our clients in media and technology, and grew to other verticals. What's really interesting about starting in media and technology is the demand, and to kind of create a managed service provider out of such high intensity demand just kind of speaks a little bit about who we are as well. The entertainment industry is chaotic and a kind of a high stress environment with not just a lot of demands, but not unrealistic demands, but the high pressure environment makes you do a lot of things with less. So there's that creative aspect that kind of uh, gets created just by being in it and working in it, as well as a work ethic. A lot of late nights um, and deadlines that kind of creep up out of nowhere. So again, creating a managed service in that environment takes a specific individual as well as a specific team. So we're headquartered in Burbank, and we have operations on the East Coast um, as well as Canada, BC, but we deliver services worldwide, and it's important to understand from a managed service perspective, because service delivery gets a little bit more complex for a lot of companies, especially with a footprint that's global. Attending to a global footprint is where we have kind of created our support system, which is 24/7. What we do specialize in systems design, implementation support for managed services and complex environments, and media and entertainment's a good example of that, but not limited to other verticals as well. We add value by working closely with decision makers and end users. We develop custom solutions and integrate best of breed systems. Our focus is to reduce costs, but also maximize business throughput. So that's an efficiency measure that we always keep in mind. There's a couple components to GPL besides managed services and our system integrations, which is our professional services side. But we also have a staffing and recruiting arm, and then we do technology rentals within VFX now. I'll talk a little bit more about those and how they're integrated with the managed services just later on. Some of our key customers, some logos that we work with, managed services and project-based, as well as key partners. I mean, these are all the trusted partners on the technology landscape. VMware, Dell, Microsoft, a lot of different storage and security partners as well. How we kind of look at managed service from a like an integration point. This is what we provide service-wise, and important aspect is really the cost. And one thing that we like to do across the board is simplify. There's no reason to make anything more complicated than it should be, especially in the technology landscape. So we start with our cost model. It's flat rate, price per user. It just makes it easy to digest. I'm sure people on this call have seen kind of super complicated invoice systems where everything's all laid out, but there's this person costs $183 for support, while this one costs $79.50, and it's like there's no reason for that, and so we simplify. What you get with that simplification, although, comes with a lot of different services. So starting with our service desk, which is your phone and email support, where we dispatch remote services as well as on-site. Our centralized services, which does all our monitoring, is a proactive approach to look at your infrastructure and see where it is, just not on a patching level, but also on a infrastructure. We have networking tools, our RMM, ticketing system, all that integrates to give us a holistic view of your environment in real time. We have a lead engineer that's assigned to each client, and they serve as the technical expert for that environment. Although that technical expert gives the rest of the team a download, and we have up-to-date documentation, so nothing falls through the crack. If I hate saying the bus metaphor, but if something happens to a lead engineer, or they're sick, we can pick up without anyone noticing, and our team has all the information at their disposal. Our system engineers design, deploy, configure all the support technology solutions under our umbrella. We also have security engineers that routinely review the security posture of each client and customer and align with best practices. The idea here is not just to align to best practices because they're best practices, but to identify risk. And what we've realized in the landscape recently is that if there's a business risk to a customer, it's typically a business risk to us as well. And what we want to do in this regard is have that security engineer kind of poke and prod routinely and have a conversation with the client to discuss the red flags as the infrastructure changes and evolves, and identify a remediation pathway to mitigate that business risk. Project managers as well. So for projects, but they kind of extend their footprint beyond that. They're really integrated, not just a service desk on GPL side, but also integrated with the stakeholders on the client side. And depending on the project, it might be a different stakeholder than our normal point of contact, or multiple stakeholders. So what we do is ensure communication lifecycle as well as the project lifecycle. The last service that GPL provides under the managed service bubble is the virtual CIO. And where this role steps in is they do their quarterly review, your QBRs. They review the IT environment, recommend changes, and evaluate the business alongside industry trends. Now, this role is particularly in I don't want to say important, but I mean, I'm the one running the show here, so I guess I am. But what this really provides is something that should help client or customer sleep better at night. And there's multiple reasons for this, but when you offload a lot of responsibility, especially the responsibility that kind of holds all your technology together, you want to really trust that team. Not to just have an understanding of your infrastructure, but have an understanding of your business and make sure that they're aligned. And that's where the vCIO really steps in. And that peace of mind, and I really wanted to express in this webinar, is how the vCIO and GPL managed services kind of bring everything together. Today, kind of the topic really touched on the landscape of today. Every organization is experiencing some kind of transformation, some kind of change in the way that they're working with their customers or their clients, and just working with their employees that work from home solution or transformation has really forced companies to adapt and change and evolve. And vCIO, if he's a good one, is right there with you, making recommendations to get to that evolution. And that evolution doesn't stop. So when it's safe to go back to the offices, it's likely that many companies won't, and they realize that that massive expense in rent or lease, and having that on-site infrastructure may not be necessary for their business. So, you know, everyone's saying this, but what does that really entail? Well, it entails a conversation with your managed service provider. If they're providing technology guidance, what they're really doing is aligning your business appropriately, looking at your budget, looking at your spend and costs, and anticipating. I mean, not that they're anticipating when we're gonna, you know, go back to normal or whatever the new normal is, or you know, the next pandemic, but as much as they can, because that's where their level of expertise lies. And that kind of gets into the first bullet point here. Is it's a solution that's customized to meet the specific needs of your organization, your business. And there's a lot of companies that provide managed services. There's a lot of companies that include vCIO in that managed service bubble. And what I've seen quite a bit in working with MSPs for the last 15 years, and on both sides of the table, being a client of, and also being a head of managed services and the vCIO team, is that that a lot of solutions MSPs and VCOs like to do is just kind of staple on a solution because it worked for one company, it's going to work for yours, and sometimes that's true. I would say that it falls short of really simply just effort and partnership. And your managed server, or sorry, your managed services provider, I always have a different viewpoint of that that title of managed and services and provider. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as a concierge provider, or a concierge service partner. So somewhere in that mixture is more accurate. And if you're a GPL customer right now, you know the special touch that the managed services provides. If you're not a customer, you know, it's really something to think about and contrast, and evaluate what the vCIO does for you. You know, the bare minimum is provide, you know, budget and roadmap and that alignment, and facilitate that conversation on a quarterly basis. But that's the bare minimum. And so in this conversation today, what really brings that peace of mind? And this is what this webinar is about today, is how the vCIO and managed services integrate to provide the best type of service for the client and the customer. And we talked a little bit about customizing a solution. I'll get back to that, because part of that is the next bullet point, which is minimizing your risk. And in order to do that, it first takes the identification of that risk. It's you know, looking at it from from top down, holistically across your not just your technology infrastructure, but your business environment, how you conduct business, your internal workflows, and what technology is supposed to do is supposed to align to make that workflow more efficient. You know, it's why we went from the typewriter to a computer. You know, it's just there's so many evolutions of technology to improve efficiency. But the real question is, well, does it? And how do we know? And these are really big questions to ask, because they affect the bottom line. They affect how services or products are delivered to your customers or clients, and they really ask the question, how well is the technology and people that are using that technology effectively uh, paralleling our business and paralleling what we're trying to accomplish in our business. And what that is different for everyone. So it provides an opportunity to go back to the solution and make it customizable. And what I was talking about just now with kind of stapling on a solution is just lazy in my mind, and it happens far too often. It it it's the baseline requirement for managed services, which is why I prefer to call a GPL a concierge service provider. The middle point here, increasing creativity output. I touched a little bit on this being an efficiency model, but what this really entails and how this brings peace of mind and how it integrates with your MSP is that the MSP pays close attention to how your business functions and on every tier of functionality. So it's not just the grunts in the field. It's all the way up through the executive level, each type of workflow. And finance is a great example of this. And this is where we talk about risk minimization as well, is because when we're looking at a company's security posture, we look at workflow. In addition to infrastructure, that's obvious. But if you've I'm sure everyone on here has heard of some wire being authorized that came from some kind of spoof or spoof account, and someone got very happy and got wired a bunch of money. This is a security concern on multiple levels, but mainly it's a workflow risk. And when we're looking at uh, security and risk, we take a look at each aspect of the organization. So how does that wire get approved? Well, it's just an email from our accounts payable to our CFO to approve it. Well, that's great. But in this case, that email was spoofed, and the CFO didn't recognize it because he's used to seeing this email 100 times and just rubber stamped it. So what we introduced in this regard is probably some spoofing security precautions, as well as like, hey, maybe we should talk about getting on the phone just to confirm this wire. It takes 2 seconds. It'll save you X dollar amount if that's if it's false. So this type of mentality, when we apply to increasing creativity output, it's not so much a stretch, because it's an evaluation of workflow. It's an evaluation of how business is conducted, and on multiple levels, and coming up with a technology solution to better assist in that process. And what I've found as an answer to this is to simplify, is to really look at the infrastructure and what it's providing, how to kind of draw it down, to remove all those moving parts. So in one aspect, a creative in media and entertainment that's in like Adobe in their creative suite or in their production suite isn't bogged down by all these components. We look at it because we want that creative to spend time on being creative. We want that finance person spending time in finance. And every aspect of the organization needs to be focused on their job, not the technology. It needs to be somewhat invisible. And it's kind of a paradox being in IT, because we want to be seen for our good efforts, but if we're seen, it's usually not something good. So making IT invisible is a great leap that any managed service provider can do. and also brings back to the topic, peace of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. So everything must be functioning correctly, right? I certainly sleep better at night knowing that, and I know our customers do too. Deploying on-demand technologies and services easily scalable. This kind of touches on the simplification as well, but also ensuring that technology can scale with the organization. So whatever, maybe a cloud offering, has a pretty predictable cost model, but we want to make sure that it aligns with the growth model as well. So sometimes people can outgrow cloud because of that and invest in hardware or a co-location. So going back to the hybrid model approach as well, the conversation that's supposed to be had in that discussion to see if your organization can be scalable and aligned with that technology and cloud approach starts with the vCIO and the other team members of that managed service provider as well. On-demand technologies. I want to touch on this because this kind of goes back to a couple of questions we had about being virtual and COVID, and on-demand top of mind, as well as what we're trying to accomplish as an MSP. I think being on demand as a service delivery is important. What the technology we use to do that on demand, it doesn't really matter to the customer as long as it's done, right? And same with the on-demand technologies internally, as long as they provide that service and functionality, doesn't really matter what it is. But deploying it and integrating it into the customer infrastructure is more than just a technology. It's that workflow, that training, that understanding that what is being delivered is what was promised in the beginning conversations of making a change in the business workflow and organization. Dealing with security remote access. This is a ever increasing component of work at home, and the compliance is always slow to catch up to this. I think it's better to apply the security measures that are required instead of waiting for them. But there's a number of things that working from home and remote access have brought up recently, and that is, the amount of infrastructure at the home is, it's like a $50 router. The amount of infrastructure dollar amount at the office is, I hope a lot more than that. And the problem is, these consumer routers and IoT devices, they are all our gateways to business risk. So identifying that as, as a solution, it's not, well, okay, you're gonna have a firewall at everyone's home. No, it's looking at the end device. It's looking at that user as a mobile element more than a infrastructure element. How are you managing services now during COVID? It's a great question, and there's a lot of components to that. But the first thing that we look at for managing services for our customers is recognizing that there's a massive change that COVID has proposed to businesses worldwide, and getting past that kind of shock phase is, it's like, okay, now what's the next step? Now we need to evaluate, look at income being reduced. Okay, so now we have a cost variable. What other variables are we affected? Is the customer or client affected by them and their ability to provide services or products? If so, what and how? There's a couple different approaches to this, and one, we like to use a lot of data and metrics to really give a sound recommendation and a pathway to maneuver around COVID and the challenges that it presents. So a couple cases with that GPL has encountered since March is the work at home environment, and right away we noticed this because we've been doing this for years, long before COVID. We have offices in Burbank and the East Coast, but our entire 90% of our or more of our workforce are remote. And so what we've done is kind of taken that template and applied it to organizations that need to kind of readjust and reevaluate how they collaborate with their employees. So looking at it from a technology perspective, you have a lot of collaboration utilities. I mean, we're on one right now, and you know, if you haven't heard of Zoom, like, welcome back to Earth, you know. And I forgot the stats, but they went from 10 million users to 200 million users or something in just a few short months. So that platform is really great for connecting people. It's one aspect of how organizations collaborate, but it's not everything. It's great for what we're doing right now, but it doesn't facilitate other aspects of an organization. So from a collaborative perspective, there's other tools. So going back to how we meet the changing needs of an organization is looking at it from a workflow perspective, but also crunching some numbers for cost, of course. You know, there's monthly costs per user, and so we want to be cognizant of changing kind of to an OpEx model because we don't have an infrastructure that we're sitting at anymore. But we look at and compare and contrast feature sets of, you know, Zoom to GoToMeeting to Microsoft Teams and all the other ones. And without throwing out a suggestion, just use Microsoft Teams. It's great because it may integrate with Microsoft, but it doesn't really facilitate your workflow. Maybe you need Slack. So the question, you know, of how we manage that services during COVID, we take every organization and identify those risks, those changes, and then come up with something customized, something that fits their needs in their budget. And, you know, sometimes that's a stretch. So we're very wary of where every dollar goes, just like everyone else now is hyper vigilant about that changing cost model. So, but it starts with that communication, and it starts with that dialogue, you know, strategically with not just the vCIO. This is where we bring in, you know, our security experts. This is where we bring in our cloud experts, because we're likely going to shift some infrastructure to the cloud or some workflow. And in media and entertainment, it's a great example of this again. You know, we're used to having clients sitting in an edit bay on site for, you know, hours on end and delivering from there. But now that's kind of changed because you know, the restrictions of the workplace. So now we're looking at PCOIP and you know, doing editing from, you know, where, you know, from your PJs in your kitchen. So I'd like to say that there's a solution or software set that can meet every need. And so far we've been pretty lucky that it has, but it doesn't mean that there is. And so there needs to be some kind of give with an organization to allow that workflow. There's what I've seen is a lot of resistance to change, and successful organizations already have this evolution mindset where they can adapt and be agile and adjust as needed. And those are the ones that are still, I mean, not all, but those are the ones that had an easier transition with the work at home. Another question here is, can you help a company move to the cloud? Most MSPs work in physical locations. And yeah, and going back to what I said, we've been in a hyper cloud environment as an MSP and a hyper remote environment for many years. And taking that template and applying it, making those adjustments to fit different companies and organizations' workflow is not impossible. So if you guys are still struggling with moving some aspects to the cloud, it's probably I'm not gonna make any assumptions, but it's probably because you've been wanting to make that transition for a while. And so what we do is we engage in our cloud with our cloud engineer, our security engineers. Our CTO likes to jump in a lot as well. He thinks it's fun, but there's what I'm seeing more now is besides the natural shift to cloud, because everyone's doing it, is a hybrid approach. And there's many reasons for this, but mainly because there's an infrastructure that already exists. And you guys have already made a capital expenditure. You own that equipment. You own the space that it's in. So there's a lot of reason and resistance to not just shut it all down or transition it. There's a lot of reason to use a hybrid approach and take advantage of the investments that you made. I mean, essentially, you just made a private cloud anyway. So tapping into that is a different type of question. It's like instead of transitioning or moving to the cloud, take advantage of your physical location. So if you're locked into that lease, just look at it as a virtual cloud. Another question here is, most MSPs work with real hardware in real data centers. Is GPL becoming like a virtual MSP? I mean, it's both. There's always going to be a hardware need. I mean, what sits in your cloud is just more hardware. You just don't see it because it's not in your server room. So we provide equipment, and there's always going to be a need for equipment, but we are definitely in the mindset of being virtual. And being a virtual MSP, I mean, is just kind of inherent in the job. If you're tied to your physical location, then you're going to be good at serving anyone on your block. But GPL has footprints all over the UK, Europe, and Asia. So we I don't want to say forced into that, but that's our model, and that model should be representative of how we conduct business as well. And being in a virtual world, I think, just requires of us to be in a virtual MSP. Another question here. Thinking about the need to lower costs and increase efficiencies and productivity, how can deploy top technology and stay competitive with limited budgets? Yeah, this is where the creative aspect comes in, because it's what we're all trying to accomplish, right? A limited budget, and if you're an IT professional, like, I totally get it. It's near impossible to get anything added onto your budget, let alone security precautions and cybersecurity stuff. I mean, so how to lower costs and increase efficiency is really the starting point for that is evaluating the workflow, and evaluating what your current software solution set is. It may be looking at a model if you're not already working from home, making that transition, because I want to make sure that the conversation that you're having isn't just an IT budget question. All right, the IT budget needs to roll up into the business budget. And as long as companies keep their IT department siloed from that conversation, they're never going to save money, right? You can nickel and dime your IT budget, and you'll make your IT director or VP of IT bend over backwards every day and burn them out really quickly. But what we're talking about is that bigger discussion on the business. And looking at efficiency measures is this in the same discussion. It's not just a technology solution here, it's a business solution. And there's a lot of things that we could do with consolidating redundant systems and making IT kind of the center of innovation. modernizing digital infrastructure and services. You know, that type of conversation turns IT from a black hole to a revenue generating one. And that's the type of conversation I'd like to have and make sure that the executive team understands. It's bridging that gap of where we're at today and where we want to go tomorrow. I can certainly talk quite a bit more about this, and I appreciate all the questions. It really helped kind of frame a lot of things and bring things in together. I really like to know what's going on out there, besides what's happening with our clients and our customers. Seeing a lot of things that parallel the concerns of organizations that we're helping. So if you need to further have any conversations or want to align with some of these initiatives, or just maybe have further questions on what really peace of mind means for a managed service provider, please let me know. Email me directly, and we'll just have that conversation. Thanks again, everyone. I really appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions or concerns or want to have a deeper conversation, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again.